to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Welcome, my brother.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you again.
You too. It's been a minute.
It has been a minute. I was so excited to see your beautiful face.
Yeah, man. Likewise.
Yeah.
And
So
I love what you've done with the place. I mean, this is like, I don't know. It feels like a really intentional space. Every glass, every Scotch glass and chair is right where it needs to be.
Oh, I'm glad you feel that way. That's what we're going for. I mean, that's definitely what we're going for. We have some space over here, like where guys can hang out and stuff. We wanted a space where people like feel good coming to.
Yeah.
So it's the right size for what we're doing here. There's really there's two kind of downsides to it. One, it's a concrete block building, so we have to work against the echo, a little bit. And then two is there's a train track right out here. I don't know if you noticed it.
And with an active train.
Very active train. Yeah, very active train. Andrew got stuck by it this morning for 15 minutes.
Oh, gosh.
So
do you guys have like the route or for the train?
He was looking at Reddit threads
up
this weekend.
Yeah.
There was an old Reddit thread from 6 years ago where someone it was the Nashville subreddit was asking, does anyone have a train schedule? I just want to know when to avoid certain tracks.
Yeah.
And the highest graded comment was this guy saying, yeah, I want to know too because I want to know where. And then he hyperlinked a phrase that I'm not going to repeat where this expletive so I can avoid this guy.
Yeah.
And I clicked on it and it was that crossing
Wow.
right there.
Right here.
Man.
Yeah. Now, what people might not know is you're the voice welcoming everyone to the Kent Lapp Podcast all 2020.
That's right, baby. That's right.
Yeah, you have a great voice for that.
Man,
but
I
you're
appreciate
in that
that.
space too, of course.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was in college, I had this, affinity for filmmaking and for just, narrative storytelling in the visual medium. And I never thought that years later I would actually have more success, moderate success, air quotes, in front of the camera than I did behind the camera.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I get my shoulder tapped all the time for random one-off stuff like this, doing whether it's, recording VO for a podcast intro, whether it's doing, VO for, a local movie theater, PSA, whatever the case may be. It's just been interesting to see how more often than not, my shoulder's getting tapped for, in front of the camera stuff, voiceover work than it is, behind the camera.
And that's not what you went to school for.
No, it's, I think I always just kind of hoped that I would land a job somewhere in the creative space.
Okay.
Even though I had my sights set on, directing and sitting in the director's chair, some kids dream of going to space, some kids dream of directing like Spielberg.
Yeah.
And so I think, while that's kind of where my eyes were kind of fixed on that kind of goal, that dream, I think I always in the back of my mind felt that as long as I could find some kind of role in the creative space, whatever that looked like, I would be very grateful and very content.
Yeah.
I just need to have something that's creatively fulfilling. And oh, by the way, if it can pay the bills, that's great too.
Yes, absolutely.
So.
The voiceover work. What are people going for when they're looking for voiceover work? Someone that can clearly articulate, but has a nice quality to their voice, and does not have maybe a super annoying accent, and
I think all those things. But I think the important thing is it just kind of depends on the project. I don't know if you listen to a lot of radio, but tons of local radio spots. They're just trying to do a lot in the in the audio space in terms of bringing in like there's one commercial for Hiller Plumbing, I believe is the local company, and what they'll try to do is basically create a funny scenario, a funny moment. But obviously, they don't have any visual to accompany that. So all of that to say, it just sort of depends on the spot, the commercial, the content needs. But it doesn't hurt if you can articulate well, enunciate well.
Okay.
I think that will definitely give you a leg up when you're auditioning for VO work.
Yeah. Well, you have a voice that's easy to listen to. I can see why people would hire you to do voiceover work because it's easy to listen to. It's clear. it's pleasant. It does, you do enunciate well. Do you, when you're doing voiceover work, are you doing anything different than if you're just, sitting on the, in the evening talking with your wife, Katie, or something? You know what I mean? Like it's a random conversation. Are you doing something different when you're doing VO work?
That's a great question. I think that obviously when I'm recording something, when I'm in the studio or, whatever the case may be, there's definitely more intentionality. Like as we're sitting right here across from each other recording this podcast episode, I'm definitely intentional and and having intentionality with how I'm speaking. I'm trying to avoid and minimize ums. There's definitely an effort that I'm putting forth. However, because it's something that I do so frequently now, it's sort of become this second nature thing. My kids are always clamoring for me to read picture books in the evenings. I'm always playing with them. And in that space, in the space of fatherhood, I get to, I guess, act as well. Because they like it when I'm big. They like when I'm reading, the storybooks in characters.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. So I'll definitely do that. So it's funny. It's kind of subconsciously become like practice for me when I'm interacting with my kids, playing with them, reading a storybook, because they love the bigness and the characters. So
is there anything that you find is effective with tone of voice, kind of tailing down at the end of a sentence? I had Shelby Stevens on here who recently moved to Hawaii. She was a news reporter with WSMV Nashville, Channel 4. And she was kind of an overachiever. She has a fascinating story. She went through 4-year college in 3 years, and she was major market news reporter in Memphis at the age of 21. And just sort of like that doesn't usually happen. Usually you go through college and then you do various jobs in like smaller markets, and then you go to major market. And she just kind of got right into it. And I was asking her about the reporter voice because, they're always like, and that's what we have for you. And back to you, Bob. It's just like you wouldn't say like, Andrew, I hope you're having a good day. And back to you, Julian. Oh, Andrew, now you talk. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't be like, it's different in a normal conversation, but reporters, they have this very kind of matter of fact, tailing off and back to you, Bob. And so I asked her about that, and she said that wasn't trained in college, which surprised me. That is like basically perpetuated through the culture of reporting. Ever since she was in 5th grade, she wanted to be a news reporter. And so she would watch news reporters and she would learn from them and how they talked and their tone of voice. And that is exactly where she got it. No one no one ever taught her. Matter of fact, they're trying now to have news reporters talk more natural, which I thought was interesting. Talk less like a news reporter and more just like a regular person. So for you, do you kind of have like a different tone of voice that you kind of pay attention to? There's another interesting thing. What's it called? Upspeak, where like I guess this is very popular in like Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
where everyone kind of right, Andrew, like they tail up at the end. And it's like super. It's kind of weird a little bit.
Yeah.
So how do you think about tone of voice when you're doing VO work?
Great question. Real quick, going back to the news reporter thing, I've always been fascinated by that kind of cadence in terms of how they talk, how they project. And I'm so glad you said that, because in terms of her just saying, "Oh yeah, it was just perpetuated. It's not anything that they ever trained you on," But you're so right. They have this like distinct like I'll just read this right here, and it's so funny because I've actually auditioned for roles, but it's always like, Ozo Coffee Roasters is a new coffee shop in Nashville, Tennessee that's looking to open at some point this week. Julian Vaca, News Channel 4. Like
that's pretty good.
You can just. You can duplicate. Yeah. It's almost formulaic in how they phrase it. But going back to your initial question, sorry, I just had to thank you for humoring me. Yeah. That cadence always fascinated me. So thank you for humoring me. So tonality and the whole tone question. Again, it just kind of comes back to the audition piece or the content, whatever that content is and whatever it calls for and demands for, you just sort of lean into that. I like to err on the side of, a little bit kind of slightly deeper tone, but even keel, moderately paced, kind of like we're talking right now, because the hope is that, and you've already said this, which I'm appreciative of, the hope is that you create, honestly, just kind of, this is going to sound so silly, but a relaxing, comfortable listening experience.
Yes, no, that's not silly.
I mean, so I think if you can just maintain, just a level tone, obviously people will be able to pick up on if you're being confident when you speak and what you're saying. So confidence actually subconsciously plays into all of this as well. But certainly in terms of tone, all that to say, to answer your initial question, I like to kind of err on the side of just, slightly deeper, moderately paced, whenever I'm, kind of doing it straight, an audition read through. And then I'll await for direction or, any kind of notes that the director might have for the audition piece.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I don't think that's silly at all, because I think that is one of the big difference makers, don't you? Because some people, well, I feel like I deal with this sometimes. Like, I'll speed up and slow down in my sentences, and that's not always the easiest to follow. And, some voices are just not as pleasant to listen to.
That's fair.
As others. And it sounds like that's not just total coincidence, that someone's putting some thought into speed, tone, inflection, all of these things, and trying to actually come up with a pleasant listening experience. But the other thing you mentioned that was interesting to me is you're basically bringing your acting also into your VO work.
Absolutely.
Because if you're going to do some VO work as a news reporter, you're going to talk like you just did reading that cup. And if you're going to, do voiceover work for something else, I just thought of the Budweiser frog, for some reason, because Tom Woodard was on, and he was the Bud in the 90s.
Yes.
And so, of course, your VO work it needs to be tailored to the project.
Yes.
So
absolutely. And that's the fun thing, just real quick, about acting in general, is that the way my brain works, because one of my first true loves is creative writing. So I feel like my headspace is always just in creativity. And so the opportunity to get to audition and act in random things, really scratches that creative itch that I just constantly have. And you just get to lean into different bits and characters and moments. And, I'm grateful that most of the stuff that I've been able to gravitate toward is in the comedic space, because I love comedy. But that's just one of the great things about acting, be it in front of the camera or voiceover, is that you get to play. It's like, a giant, being in a giant sandbox and just getting to play with different things, as an actor. I love it. So
yeah. Well, what do you love about creative work? What is it about that is a passion for you?
I think, and I've been asked this, a handful of times before, so I've really been able to give it thought. But I think first and foremost, as a Christian, it's one of the easiest, most natural ways that I can glorify the ultimate creator in God. And I'm not just, saying that to blow smoke or to give the right answer. I actually believe that. I actually believe that for me, it's my calling. It's how I can, give him glory. And so I think that would be my first kind of big answer to that question. But then,
and just on that, so and then the premise for that basically is we have a God who created the universe, and part of that universe was us, and we have this sort of awareness, consciousness, creativeness about us that animals do not have, and when we use that and manipulate that and create things, out of that, that's a way to sort of like shine back to the creator. Is that sort of what you're thinking there?
Exactly. And whatever the medium is. And
it's true. And that's the big difference between us and animals.
Yes.
It's a massive difference. Like
is.
we think things, like we rationalize things. We have a reason. We come up with ideas. Animals don't, they're just instinct.
Yeah. It's so true. And to that point, I think, anybody who's listening to this podcast, if your reaction to hearing that is, oh, okay, well, that's all well and good for Julian. He's a creative, he's a creator, but that doesn't really necessarily, that's not what it necessarily looks like for me. I would actually say, dentists are creative, any kind of tradesman, they're creative, whether it's a welder or I just, there's creativity in so many things.
Yeah.
I think, and I hope that doesn't sound like a cop-out answer. I truly believe that you can be creative in just about anything. But yeah, so you thank you for building that out a little bit. I wholeheartedly agree with that, Kent. And then secondly, to answer your initial question, I think that there's just something so appealing and invigorating about looking at a blank piece of paper. When I'm setting out to write, a short story or, a piece of copy for my day job, whatever the case may be, when I set out to write, there's just something that's so incredibly exciting about the unknown and the possibilities. And I live for that moment where, I'm staring at my computer screen and the cursor's flashing and blinking right before I've typed out that first word. It's just a very invigorating, experience right before you leap into the page.
Yeah. Is that intimidating for you, the writing in particular? Because there are some creative, everyone's different, but the one creative thing that I find intimidating, probably one of the more intimidating ones, is writing, because it's like, man, there's so many ways you can go, but there's always a best way,
right?
And like trying to like funnel it down to what should actually be written. Do you find that intimidating? Do you find that like you'll sit there for too long sometimes just trying to get it right, or do you just enjoy getting started and then refining it?
I think the latter. I think what's the intimidation for me comes later. The intimidation isn't necessarily in, okay, rolling up my sleeves and, setting out to write, 500 words. I think that because writing has become habitual and a discipline for me over the years, I don't think that the intimidation piece is in that moment. Now, like any creative, I'll hit a block at times where I'll just need to step away from the notepad or the computer and clear my head. But mostly the intimidation comes after I've written and it's time for me to either share my piece with a client, my, creative director, the world at large. It's that, it's just that uncertainty of, are people going to resonate with what I just wrote?
Yeah.
Not that I'm necessarily fixing my security on how well something is received, but anybody who spends any length of time working on something wants to be affirmed.
Yeah,
wants to know that what they created is worth it. So I think for me, the intimidation definitely comes a little bit further down the line.
Yeah. So if you are a creative, which you definitely are, you love to do creative things, which plays on, my understanding, is a particular side of your brain, right? Or a part of your brain.
Right.
I don't know I forget now if it's the left side or the right side, but it plays on a particular side. And then the more like structured, organized math, that's kind of the other part of your brain. So it sounds like you like to be kind of working in that creative space or creative side of your brain.
Right.
Then does your wife compliment you with, are you weak in like other areas? Like, are there things that you just detest to do? Like, I don't know, the schedule or the finances. And then does Katie compliment you in those areas?
So I'm so glad you bring that up, because I think that is actually a misconception of how creators, I'll say how creators ought to work, how creators ought to operate, because I think that, there's this idea that so many creatives are free-spirited and don't thrive in schedule and don't thrive under structure and don't thrive, in routine. But I think that working in the creative space demands all of those structures and all of those routines and deliverables and deadlines. And so, there's definitely overlap, actually. Now, that's not to say that it comes naturally or that I don't detest certain things like you were, saying about deadlines and structure. But I have found over the years, and certainly working in a more traditional 9-to-5 setting now, where, there are people waiting for certain deliverables, people waiting for things from me. I can't not create in structure.
Yep.
So and honestly, it's helped inform my creativity now. Because I can't just, work, sort of just, pace around my room and, just kind of work at my own pace. I've got people waiting for me, and I've got deadlines, whether self-imposed or imposed by, my superiors. So I actually enjoy the structure.
Yeah. Okay. What is your favorite creative activity? Is it writing or is it something else?
Man, that's a really good question, because I think the answer changes on any given week. So and on all,
you like the variation?
I think so, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit. Anytime I'm acting and I'm in front of the camera and I'm getting to dialogue with the director or producer, and I'm just having fun and creative in that space, I'm like, man, this is my calling. This is it. This feels great. I love this. But then if I'm coming to the end of a pretty lengthy chapter in a novel that I'm working on, say, and I just feel like, man, I was able to kind of bring the characters full circle in this moment. I'm about to hit the home stretch to completing this novel. I'll just feel like this huge sense of like exhilaration, like, man, this is what I was called to do.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated answer. I think it just kind of depends on, I'll say this. I think my two creative loves are definitely creative writing, long-form creative writing, and acting. Mm-hmm. I think if either one of those were to really take off, I would be immensely grateful.
Yeah.
And
well, on the long-form creative writing, I mean, you have novels out there that people can buy right now on Amazon, right?
This is true. Yes.
How many and what are they called?
So I've got 5 young adult novels that I've written that are all kind of in the spirit of The Hunger Games, The Maze Runner, just those fast-paced action adventure stories that have characters that are hopefully real and dynamic, that can ground the story and resonate with readers. So I definitely love writing in that space. But the one book that I'm probably the most excited about is Running from Lions, which is the first book in a trilogy. And it's really interesting because 2020 has been just such a crazy year. Everything that's been going on, it's an election year, everything with COVID-19, all of the, uncertainty in both in our nation and in the world. But interestingly, by contrast, I've had the biggest creative wins that I've had in my entire career in 2020.
Oh, congratulations.
It's been
very cool.
It's been very interesting to just kind of observe how honestly, it's all God. I can't credit any of this to myself, but to just kind of sit back and observe how things are just starting to slowly fall into place for me creatively. And on the novel piece, I'm actually, for the first time, in talks with HarperCollins. They're a publishing company, a pretty big publishing outfit.
Yep.
We're in talks on traditionally publishing one of my books.
Very cool.
It's the furthest I've ever gotten, and if nothing ever comes of it, it's a great feeling knowing that they're interested and that we're in talks.
That's awesome. Here's Running from Lions right here. The Running Saga #1 by Julian Vaca.
Yes.
Running, and this is on, what are you on, Andrew? Are you on Amazon?
Goodreads.
Oh, yes.
This is Goodreads.
Goodreads is a great site.
Yep. Farah, is that how you pronounce it? Farah is a night watcher. It's a job she's had in her village for over a year, and it may end up being her role. Rules are important. They're how you survive in the barren, post-apocalyptic desert known as the Bull. But Farah doesn't want to be a night watcher, and the truth is she doesn't know what she wants. Aha. Rubik from another planet. He's crash landed on Earth. We got some extraterrestrial stuff going on. After being lost in the galaxies for what felt like a millennia, he doesn't remember anything of his race, his purpose, or his origins. All he has to his name are troubling, consuming questions. Ooh. On a chilly, starry night, their paths will cross, sending them on a dual journey to find answers. Yet their venture of discovery quickly turns into a race for survival. The Undergrounders, a band of ruthless desert pirates, know something about Rubik that Farah does not, and they'll stop at nothing to take him captive. Very nice.
Yeah. It's so do you want to do the audiobook? That was great.
Yeah, I do want to do the audiobook.
Let's tap Kent Lapp for the audiobook.
Well.
It's not a lucrative business.
Podcast schedule.
Thank you. Yes, please do.
Yeah, that's very cool, man.
Yeah.
So when was this written? It probably says up there.
So that one was independently released in 2013.
Okay.
So it's been a minute, and one of the things that I have found in the publishing novel writing space is that things take a long time.
Okay.
Just to give you a little bit of perspective, it's a really fascinating process. What you do is you send out query letters, which are basically like cover letters, but they tell a little bit about your novel and a little bit about yourself. You strike the balance of pitching what the story is about and pitching yourself. You send those to prospective agents. Agents then read through your query letter. Sometimes they'll ask for sample chapters of your novel, and then they'll decide whether or not they want to represent you. That's the first step, and it's a very hard step because agents have so many. I mean, how many people do you know have said, I've got that novel that I've been working on that everybody has a story to tell. And so think about that slush pile.
Oh, for sure. And these agents, are you trying to find an agent in your city or just anywhere in America?
Anywhere.
Okay.
Anywhere.
All right.
And so after you've checked that first box, then the work is on the agent to champion for your novel to different publishing houses. And obviously you have the big ones like Random House, Penguin, HarperCollins. But of course there are countless, smaller mid-market publishing houses all over the country. And so then that begins a process of trying to get your manuscript via the agent to these prospective publishers. So it's a very long process. So in March, I submitted Running from Lions, a reworked, retooled version of Running from Lions to HarperCollins. And it wasn't until September, so March all the way to September, that I got my first email response.
Wow.
And that was relatively quickly.
Now, is this through an agent? Do you have an agent? Or did you just submit it directly somehow to HarperCollins?
This is a unique instance in which my freelance editor friend just got a job at HarperCollins, and she said, "Hey, I just befriended the acquisitions editor in fiction, and I mentioned your name and the premise. She would like to look at your manuscript." And so that felt super providential because I was able to essentially bypass that super long process of trying to find a prospective agent and get the manuscript right to the acquisitions editor at HarperCollins. So
Very
that was a
nice.
huge blessing.
If you get that deal, is it going to be Running from Lions, the second book in the saga, or the reworked, and then potentially 2 and 3?
Great question. Where we're at in the conversation is they're not keen on publishing something that was previously released.
Okay.
So what I'm working on right now is an outline packet for a new, never released trilogy in the same kind of genre.
Okay.
So Running from Lions essentially piqued their interest, got them interested in potentially publishing me, and now the conversation turns to, well, what are you working on next?
Yeah. Okay. So if you're going to have, let's say you get the deal with HarperCollins and they give you a 3-book deal, and I'm assuming they have mile markers in there with the first book absolutely flops. They're not on the hook paying you for book number 2 and 3, right?
Correct.
And is there a chance they prepay you on book 1, or is that very unlikely?
It's super interesting, and I think it depends on. I think it's case by case. So because there are it's escaping my mind right now, but I think they just call it advances, where they pay you a certain an advance, and then what you make on the back end is very small.
I see.
Authors make, it's almost criminal.
Yeah.
What authors make on the back end. Now, of course, you have all kinds of success stories like the J.K. Rowlings of the world. She wrote Harry Potter. Suzanne Collins, who wrote Hunger Games. I mean, clearly they don't ever have to do anything else.
Yeah.
But I think most published authors, even successful ones, will still be adjunct creative writing professors at a college.
Yes.
Or, do any number of different things.
I've heard as low as $1 a book after it's all said and done. That book's selling for $10.99.
Yeah.
And the author gets $1.
Yeah.
That sounds criminal, honestly. I mean, but I guess if you think of it in terms of, because the other thing is, it's hard to sell a lot of books.
Exactly.
And so if the publisher fronts, some amount of money, they need to sell a lot of books just to make that money back. So I mean, I sort of get that.
And there's a lot of overhead for those publishing companies, you know.
Sure.
While it doesn't necessarily cost a ton to print the books, it really doesn't. The printing isn't the cost. It's the overhead. It's the in-house acquisition editors and the payroll.
Right.
Those brick and mortar, HarperCollins and all of these other publishers are still brick and mortar businesses.
Yes, true.
So there's overhead with that.
Okay, so let's say you get this deal, and now you have 3 books to write, which is even a bigger deal. But even if you just bring it down to one book, if someone says, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars to write a novel, write a fiction book, and that X amount is enough for you to actually do it, and then so you set off and embark on doing this, and what's a reasonable time frame to get this book done? 6 months, 12 months?
Great question. I think for something like this in this genre, young adult fiction, a first-time author who has no credibility, legitimacy, I'm at the mercy of the publisher. So what that means is, I don't have any, I don't have any say in the timeline, or I'm basically at their mercy because I'm not established. So likely what they'll do is say, okay, you have 6 months for a first draft, and so that it's then on me to set my schedule, figure out how I'm going to work that out with my 9 to 5, and get that first draft to them. And then, of course, after that, there's likely another 3 to 6 months of revisions. I'll get probably a handful of different ARC advanced reading copies where I'll have to go through and make sure everything looks good. And it's a long process. So in totality, you're looking at anywhere from a year and a half, maybe even 2 years.
It really is that long?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Do you think it would be less for nonfiction? Less time? Great
question. I think, again, it just kind of depends on the writer, on the author, on the subject matter. I think it just sort of depends.
Okay. So let's say the money that they're willing to pay you is acceptable to you and the time frame is acceptable. Let's just say it's 6 months. Now what do you do? I mean, this sounds difficult.
I know.
I mean, do you just start to go sit outside under a tree and just start to dream with your eyes closed and write down what comes to you? Do you?
I love that that's where you go first. You're just picturing me under an apple tree with a moleskin.
That must be how you write the best novels. You know what I mean? Like in the fall on a mountainside and like it's just coming to mind and you're just writing it, an outline and you sit there for a couple of days and you sleep at night and eat food, but aside from that, you're just like brainchilding this thing, or you just get all amped up on coffee and go to a coffee shop and start writing? Like, how do you even do this?
Great question. I think that, so first of all, this might fascinate you. Authors, writers in the long form narrative space, we use word counts as our mile markers. So Running from Lines, just to give you a little bit of perspective, is just under 90,000 words. So we use word counts as our kind of mile markers. So on a really good day, when the creative juices are flowing and the story is just sort of telling itself, I can probably churn out anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500 words. So if that just gives you a little bit of perspective.
So let's just say 1,500 words. Andrew, what's 90,000 divided by 1,500?
Let's see this quick math in action.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that in my
head. You're not going to Rain Man it? I was kind of expecting you to Rain Man it.
No, I'm not good at that. I did download an app last night. I was up to like 12:15 last night. It was weird. I just wasn't tired.
You were eagerly anticipating this conversation, Kent.
But the house was quiet. Everyone was sleeping, and I was just sitting in the living room on my phone watching random YouTube videos, and it was fun. And then this ad popped up on YouTube about Elevate, and then I was doing that, and it like improves your reading and writing and math and like brain and stuff. And that's where I realized, I'm not good at fast math.
90,000 divided by 1,500?
Yeah.
60.
So that's 60 days.
2 months.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's a decent day.
Yeah.
Dang, that's so much.
Yeah, it is. And that's why so many creative writers, like I have so many creative writer friends who won't even leave the bed in the morning to go use the restroom or brush their teeth until they've written 500 words.
Oh, wow.
So you just have your laptop on your nightstand, and you just, you pull it over, you first thing you do, and it really becomes habitual and a discipline. But to answer your initial question, I think likely what I would do is kind of create a writing retreat for myself.
Okay.
So I would try and work it out with work, where I would take, 1 to 2 weeks, and I would use those uninterrupted days to get a bulk of the writing done.
You would like go on vacation for 1 or 2 weeks.
Right.
Okay.
And I would really just hyper focus on, on that word count. And it's so funny because it sounds rote and almost like formulaic in the creative space. Like here I am trying to tell a creative, interesting, engaging story that hopefully readers will resonate.
Yeah.
And yet I've reduced it down to word count.
Right.
But you have to.
Yeah.
You have to. You can't. Some creators are afforded the opportunity to wait for inspiration to strike them. But for them, I would say they are the exception and not the rule.
Yeah.
The rule is you have to create in structure.
Okay. So, but if you are going to pull your laptop out, say before you even get out of bed in the morning, and you're going to start writing, but first you probably have an outline, right? Like if you go somewhere for 1 or 2 weeks, the first thing you do, what's the first thing you do? It's probably not you just start writing, right? First you think about the story, the general arc of the story, some mile markers along the way, some various characters in the story, and then you start writing. And then, of course, it kind of fills out, and maybe some characters get introduced that you hadn't seen when you wrote the outline, those types of things. But do you first kind of create the general trajectory before you just start writing? Or you just start writing?
Man, I love this question because I'm super passionate about this. An author who is a hero of mine, he's a contemporary science fiction fantasy writer. His name's Brandon Sanderson. He has distilled creative writing as an approach, as a craft, into 2 different forms of writing. One is outline writing. That's everything that you just talked about. Having a day or two where you've got your dry erase marker, your dry erase board, and you're fleshing out the story to the best of your ability with characters, plot points, the overall arc of the story, trajectory of the story. And then you use that as your roadmap for writing. The second form or approach is discovery writing. And that's where you have just the general seed of the idea, the premise. And then you just start writing. You just follow your main character or characters on this journey and just discover alongside them. I actually fall into that camp.
Wow.
I have the seed of the idea, the premise, the general idea of what's going to happen in my head, and I'll jot that down in bullet points. Maybe it's, 250 words of just, stream of consciousness. And then I just start writing. Because if I focus too much on the outlining and the road mapping of the overall narrative, I get lost in my head. I get hung up on the details. I overthink. I overcomplicate. And it becomes, that's an instance of it becoming too structured.
I see.
So I have to lean into the discovery writing piece. Now, that first draft in effect becomes an outline of sorts, because that first draft isn't what's going to see the light of day. There'll be revisions. I'll figure out something in the third act with a certain character that I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's what that character has to do. Now I have to go back and plant that seed in acts 1 and 2.
I see.
So you sort of get your first draft done, then you kind of reverse engineer some things, plant the seeds where they need to be planted early on, and justify certain character decisions so that it feels cohesive and not random.
That makes total sense. Do you battle against the temptation to just use a bunch of filler words to get to 90,000 words as easily as possible? You know what I mean? Like if you're just going to sit down and just start writing, well, crap, you could write a book on just coming here into this office and leaving again. Maybe not 90,000 words, but probably 30,000, right? I mean, all the details and everything, but no one would want to read that.
Exactly.
So, but you have to use enough of detail to take people on that journey.
Exactly.
Is there a temptation to use too much detail to fill words as you go in that journey?
I think so. I think a lot of first-time young writers try to be a little bit too cute and too superfluous with their prose, and they try to make everything just seem like, super lyrical and just very like where I mean, there's nothing wrong with that writing style as long as it services the story. If it becomes, a gimmick, I think the readers are going to, see right through that.
Yes.
So I think the important thing is servicing your story. Make sure that you're engaging your reader and that it's a page turner and that the story is what's really driving the process. I will say that the biggest temptation that I fight as a writer is that temptation to reread what I've already written. I can't tell you how many hours you can burn by coming to the end of a couple of chapters and wanting to go back and reread those couple of chapters and start fine-tuning and massaging things too early.
Okay.
Keep your sights set on the finish line.
Okay.
There is a time and a place for coming back, revising, cleaning it up, massaging the narrative. That time is not during the first pass, though.
Okay. Is that time after you've done a first pass in the entire book or the first act, and then you go back?
I would say the best case scenario is at the end of the novel.
Okay.
But if you can wait until the first act, I think that's great.
Okay.
For me, I need to push through and get across that finish line until I go back. And honestly, one of the greatest things that you can do for your story is create distance between when you've completed the first draft and when you open it again. Now, obviously, traditionally published authors who are working on deadlines aren't afforded that opportunity. But one of the things that was super exciting for me in revisiting Running from Lions is I independently published that in 2013. I cracked it open and blew the dust off of it in 2019 and retooled it. So, however many years later that is. And that was hugely beneficial because I had grown as a writer, learned new techniques as a creative writer, and I was able to have an incredibly critical eye on it that I otherwise wouldn't have had a couple of weeks after writing it.
Yeah, that thought about letting it breathe, that's very interesting because very commonly I will, if it's an example, maybe this doesn't happen every time or that often, but sometimes if I'm going to say prepare for a podcast, I have plenty of time the next morning, but if I can do a little bit the night before and sleep on it, or there's something that like an idea that I'm working through, if I can have do a little bit on it the night before, then let it rest overnight, come back to it. Something about letting it rest just a little bit, even though this is just an example, and you're not talking about letting it rest overnight. You're talking about letting it rest for weeks or months.
Yes.
But I think it might be the same thing. Whatever that is, just to let it sit a little bit, let it breathe. Just when you sleep on something, I feel like your brain sort of subconsciously processes it. There's some benefits there. Andrew, can you pull up the psychopath test? Chad Stevens, who was just on the podcast, I think it was last week, brought up this book, The Psychopath Test. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because the author, who is the author?
John Ronson.
John Ronson. He also wrote Men Who Stare at Goats, I believe. And I've not read that book, but I think that's a fairly popular book.
I'm familiar with his work, yeah.
So this book it's a nonfiction book, and it's about psychopaths, quite frankly. And it is written so the reason I'm bringing this up is because this touches on detail and bringing people in the story, but not being superfluous. I mean, this book is incredibly hard to put down. I'm halfway through, and I've only sat down to read it 2 or 3 times. And if I had time, and Chad mentioned on the podcast, he read the entire book on a Saturday. He never does that before. He said he's like me, which he reads fairly slow, and he comes back and rereads some things. That's exactly how I read too. I underline a lot. Like I feel like I have enough of ADD to. It makes it hard to kind of concentrate, and so I have to like reread some sentences a lot and when I read, and it's a little, but this book, it's written in a way that is super compelling, and it's extremely hard to put down, and he's writing in story. So like he's talking about, it's basically the story of him kind of visiting academics and professors and visiting jail cells and going to Wall Street and visiting all these people, interviewing them about psychopaths and why they, killed those 3 people, and then they thought they were fixed, and you let them out, and then they killed other people. And that's a psychopath, and they have no empathy. And so he's not just like stating the facts, he's telling the story of him doing these interviews and meeting these people and what it was like. And you just are along for the ride. I mean, it's remarkable. So he has the right mix of detail, story, facts, and it's not too much, and it's not, it's just, so man, it's like, it's like Target says, when it fits, you feel it. You know what I mean? When
Yes.
it's just right, it's just right.
Yes.
So coming back to your writing, characters, I'm just picturing like you have, what was one of those characters in that story? Kara?
Farah.
Farah. Do you like draw Farah on the whiteboard, then you draw some character traits or jot some character traits down for her, and then as you're going through the story, you need to make sure that every time you portray Farah, that she's in character, because that's super, super important.
Yeah.
How do you keep your characters true to their character, or is it just in your head and it's just something about the story that you kind of see with the vision for it, and then you have the characters and it's just like, it just sticks, and then as you're writing, it just subconsciously you get it right?
I think that I start with every character. I start with their biggest flaw, the thing that they are working through the most in their life, and I reverse engineer the behavior traits and the character traits from that. So, for example, the biggest thing that Farah struggles with in Running from Lions is she's basically confronting a crisis of identity. She wants to want something. She doesn't know what that is, and she doesn't know how she's going to achieve that. But she feels a little aimless. She feels as if she doesn't really have an identity. So with that as my character's North Star, so to speak, I kind of reverse engineer her behavior traits from there. How she would react to conflict. How would she react, when she's in a safe, comfortable place. And as an actor, I think I'm afforded almost like a leg up in that world of character creating, because I get to sort of get in these characters' heads and play that role as I'm writing them. Think about, and really, not to go down a tangent, but the Enneagram is another great, question to ask yourself as a writer. Well, which Enneagram, number or, would this character be? And that helps inform the decisions that they make in the story as well.
Yeah, well, that's what I was sort of wondering.
Yeah.
Like, do you picture these characters as extroverts, and this one's introverted, and this one's like a number 4 on the Enneagram? Like, do you go to that level and jot it down so you don't forget it? Or is it just sort of natural as you're writing? You just sort of know the character has a North Star, and you just know you can tell whether what you're writing is congruent with that North Star.
Both. I think both. I think it's, to some degree, you absolutely have to have notes that you're referencing as you're writing the story. Otherwise, it's going to feel disjointed.
Okay.
But then the other reason why it's important to have some notes to reference throughout is because in filmmaking, in screenwriting, they tell you that there are 2 types of characters. There's a flat character and there's a round character. Flat characters, flat characters, just very simply, I'll just put it this way, are characters that don't change at the end of the movie. They're the same at the very end that they were at the beginning. Your round characters have changed, whether that's for the better or for the worse. They've changed. They've had an arc. You can clearly see how, I'm trying to think of a great example. For whatever reason, The Goonies comes to mind. The main character at the very beginning isn't very confident. He's played by, I think, Sean Astin. Yeah.
Sean Astin.
Yeah. And at the very end, he kisses the girl, and he's confident, and, he's sort of become the group's leader. You can clearly see, he's coming to his own. Mm-hmm. He's changed. So all that to say, Kent, I think that having some notes that you can reference, that you can cite throughout the writing process is all but necessary, because you have to make sure that they're consistent, that they're experiencing that growth that you want them to experience. And honestly, that's going to resonate with that has to resonate with characters. Like,
yes.
And if you're going to connect with what you're reading, there has to be dimension, and there has to be a level of dynamic to the character. So it's a little bit of both, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. How about one thing that we've talked about recently is, do you listen to any Post Malone? You familiar?
Not at all where I thought you were going to go.
Okay.
Yes.
But you know who I mean.
Yes, the rapper, pop artist.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he's sort of, it's hard to pin a particular genre on him, but he's super, he's
got all the
sort of
face
hit
tattoos.
it right now. He's got all the face tattoos everywhere, and he's just sort of broken through in the last few years. And he has a lot of explicitives in a lot of his songs, so I'm not necessarily recommending it. There's a few songs that are clean, like Circles and Sunflower, which are really great songs. But what's interesting about him is you don't get his music without a crap ton of cigarettes and Bud Light, and probably a bunch of other drugs too. Not probably, a bunch of other drugs too. You know what I mean? And so it's like, if you want, now without all of those any of those substances, you would get some music from him. He would say you wouldn't get the quality of music that you do get from him. So there's something about these substances and his creative process that puts out what he's able to put out. I'm not condoning these things necessarily,
right?
But there does seem to be a utility to some of these things. So for you, if you're going to go, 1 or 2 weeks, do you drink a crap ton of coffee? Do you take a little alcohol, get a little buzz going? Do you smoke some cigarettes? Like, do you go to a state where weed is legal? Do you feel like that helps? Like, do you use, I mean, it's not a joke. I'm actually seriously asking.
I know.
Like, do you use like either things that you ingest or substances or your environment that sort of helps trigger this process?
I'm laughing because I've never thought about it until this exact moment. That's why I'm laughing. It's not that the question's absurd. It's that it's, oh my gosh, yes, I do do that.
It's a little out of the box question because I'm asking you if you do drugs to write a novel, which you may not be comfortable answering on the podcast.
But can we edit my answer out? Yeah. No. The short answer is yes, and basically it's two things, and I've just realized that every single time I've come to the completion of a novel, it's been with the assistance of two things in particular. One, coffee. I don't want to say that I rely on coffee, but I'm pretty darn near close to needing it when in my creativity. It just, gosh, I don't know how to put it. I don't want to say it awakens me. That sounds silly.
Does it focus your brain?
I think. Cheers,
I
friend.
drink coffee for your protection.
Cheers, that boys. Mug. Yes, cheers
to coffee.
It definitely, maybe it centers me, maybe it focuses me, maybe it grounds me, but I really need it to get going. So definitely coffee. And also I just love coffee. I wouldn't say that I'm a coffee snob. Like I don't, grind my own beans. I don't have a Chemex at home, but I know good coffee when I taste it. I drink it black. Not that there's anything wrong with putting stuff in it, but
black is the way to go for sure. Do you have a Keurig at home, or how do you make it?
We just have like a Mr. Coffee.
French vanilla powder creamer over there.
Our producer over here just...
Coals on my head.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. I just prefer it black. I just have like a slightly higher end, Cuisinart, that has a very specific way of distributing the hot water when it brews. So it kind of, honestly, it's a slight step up above from like a, Black & Decker
but it's a coffee maker type thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then I'll just get my grounds from somewhere local.
Yeah.
Although often I've been getting a lot of mileage out of Aldi's coffee grounds, which are, if you haven't tried it, check it out. It's just
I've not.
You should check
it out.
So
organic or no?
It's just your basic. Honestly, I think they just call it coffee shop coffee.
Okay, yeah,
and it's been great. It's been great. So coffee for sure, and then the second thing is music. I have to have some kind of subtle, atmospheric, Brian Eno, music that can just. Is playing in the background. It's subtle. It's not overbearing. I usually can't write with music that has lyrics or vocals in it. It has to be ambient. So I would say those are the two big things: coffee and ambient atmospheric music.
Nice. Who was that?
Brian Eno.
Brian Eno. Can you make a note of that? We need to listen to him at some point, Andrew. Because if it's atmospheric, is there not lyrics to it?
No.
Okay. Because there's time and a space for that for sure. Yeah. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Tim Ferriss?
Oh, that sounds familiar.
He's an
Why do
author.
I know that name?
He has a podcast too.
Then yes.
4 Hour Work Week,
yes.
and then he wrote a bunch of 4 hour books. 3 or 4 more. Tools of Titans is up here. And I've heard him say, this is a couple of years ago, so I don't know how he does it now, but he basically writes between like midnight and 4 a.m.
Whoa.
Yeah, and he has, at that point, he's probably well caffeinated, whether that's from tea or coffee, I'm not sure. And then, and this might have changed, but this was for a particular book. He would have a glass of red wine, and he would put a movie on mute. And between like midnight and 4 a.m., he's all caffeinated. He's got some red wine. There's a movie on mute, and he would write. And, I mean, everyone has their, like it worked for him. You know, everyone has their process. And then he'd sleep till, I don't know what time he'd sleep to, but it needed to be in the middle of the night.
That sounds incredibly distracting and like not conducive at all for writing. And yet that's what he needs.
That's what works. Exactly.
Man, that's so interesting.
I've dabbled, a couple years ago, I dabbled with like having some things on mute on the TV when I was working and just kind of got away from it. I didn't really like it. But all right, so there is a lot of time and effort. There's an art around writing a novel.
Yeah.
Doing this creative work that someone can read, and it's not nonfiction. It is fiction. It's a story. This came out of someone's brain. This came out of Julian Vaca's mind. What do you say is the value of that in society?
Ooh.
You know what I mean? Like, there is a value there. There is no doubt about it. Someone's going to be on the podcast soon. I can't think of his name. He's local here, and he's really accomplished ad writer. I'm super excited to have him on.
That's awesome.
And he says one of the things he sent over is that he thinks that more business people and entrepreneurs should read more fiction than nonfiction. And that was interesting.
As a fiction writer, yes.
Yeah. So
I endorse that.
There's a place in society for sure. What is that place? Is it mere amusement? Is it mere passing people's time? Is it you get to read, for an hour or two in the evening instead of watching TV, and there's just some kind of an amusement value there? But I feel like it might be more than that. I wonder if it kind of ties into how like we're kind of caught up in a grand narrative.
Yeah.
This comes back to faith a little bit.
Yeah.
And then stories play on that, and that helps salve our soul or whatever. I mean, I don't know. What do you think the place of like a novel like that is in society?
I mean, for me, as I'm reading, going through novels, and consuming writers who I adore and who I look up to, I think for me, the value is in the inspiration from the works, from their novels, and how it informs how I am as a creator, as an employee, as a human being. Whenever I come to the end of a novel, I just feel accomplished and inspired and frankly refreshed. And because reading requires a level of investment, let's just say it, that binging a Netflix show or watching a movie or listening to, an album on Spotify or Apple Music does not. Mm-hmm. It requires an investment of your time. It requires a level of discipline to sit down, crack open your book and read it, especially in an age where so many things are vying for our attention. Social media, video games, VR. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are just fighting for our energy and our attention. So to sit down and read something, read a novel, and get to the end, there's definitely a level of accomplishment that comes with that. I know for me, I can only speak for myself. I feel refreshed, rejuvenated, and inspired to go and create my own things.
Yeah.
So I would say that's one piece of it. But then the other piece of it as a Christian, even though I try not to be overt with this, there's definitely allegory and themes that are baked into my stories that hopefully inspire discussion and challenge readers. So you'll get to the end of a story, hopefully, that I've written, and you're faced with, some questions about hopefully what you thought or think you believed about a certain thing that has now challenged you at the end. So I would say the other piece is hopefully it challenges readers to think, to be thinkers. And that's kind of my response to that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that there's something about reading a good book. Now, I don't read a ton of fiction, but reading a good story, fiction, it triggers sort of like it almost feels like the good ones kind of pull you to a higher calling. You know, like they're like pulling you up to be a better person, to live a grander life yourself. You know, to be more alive, more present, more, I guess, live a more fulfilled life yourself. Like live your own story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and everyone's story is different. Everyone has a different story to live. But there's something about reading a good fiction, a good story, whether it's real or fiction, that is like, it's inspirational.
Yes.
So that's a big deal to be able to do that, you know, for a few people, at least in society.
Yeah.
In some small way through a fiction. I mean, that's a noble undertaking.
I'll piggyback off of that and just quickly bring it back to the workforce. I think creative writing also empowers and enables people with certain tools that they otherwise wouldn't necessarily have. So, for example, my 9 to 5 is working in marketing for a music licensing company here in Nashville, Soundstripe. And so I'm their social media marketer. I help with copywriting, but creative writing has helped sharpen those marketing skills, because all marketing is good storytelling, is being able to tell a good story. I mean, Donald Miller is all about this right now. And so I think creative writing, can really help inform and sharpen certain tools that are applicable to many different types of, workforces.
I totally agree. Now, let me ask you this. When we read a good novel, a good fiction book with a grand story, and the characters are just well thought of, and this thing goes somewhere, and like there's a liveliness to it, or like it's like it takes on a life of its own. You know what I mean?
Yep.
All right. So we sort of get that, and we love that, and the story clicks and becomes popular because we see the characters kind of playing out their story on a grand level. But why don't we live our lives that way more? You know what I mean? Like we all sort of, when we read a really good story, we don't say like, basically what we say is like, dude, that was awesome. It was a great story. And we just feel inspired in those types of things. Rarely are we like talking about the specifics that felt inspirational because, of these, 6 things. We just kind of know.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like we're tapping into the way that life should be lived, because almost universally, when there's a really good story, we all know it's a good story.
Yeah.
But then a lot of times we put the book down and then just go living our lives in sort of a half-ass function.
Yeah.
What's that disconnect all about?
I think it's very simple. And I think it can be distilled down to this. I think it's easy and appealing to find an escape. And once you've had that escape, you just go back doing your thing. And an escape is anything from drugs to a video game to watching a bunch of movies or TV to reading a novel. It's in that same kind of camp of just of being an escape. It just isn't. It just seems more appealing because it's like, oh, I'm reading a book. But to a certain degree, you're still escaping. You're still entering into a world, especially when you're reading fiction. You're still escaping into a world and getting caught up with characters and the story and escaping to that world. I mean, Harry Potter is a perfect example because readers were literally transported to a wizarding school. When you're reading it, you're there at Hogwarts with Harry, Ron, and Hermione. That is an escape in every sense of the word. Sure. And so I think it's easy to like want to escape to these worlds, to these, in these books. And then when you go back to, to everyday life, it's just everyday life.
Yes.
Which I think is what uniquely sets the Bible apart from any other written, narrative. Because Obviously, it's God breathed, it's God inspired, and I believe in submitting to the entire authority of Scripture. But it's so different in that it's there's the life that Jesus lived in his ministry is a challenging one to Christians and to its readers. He's calling us to pick up our cross and follow him. I think that's just what sets it apart from other books. That's why it's more than just it's more than just an escape.
Yeah, you're totally right about that. Wow. Man, that was fun. I'm glad we went down that rabbit trail.
Yes.
That was great, man.
Yeah, that was great. I anytime I can talk about creative writing at any length, I'm a happy camper.
Yeah.
I clearly love it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
Yeah.
And I feel like it plays on so much more than just writing too. Like it bleeds out into other areas of life. Comedy. We have to talk about comedy because I know you've done mostly improv. Is that correct? Have you done stand up?
I've never done stand up. I have done for a year and a half. I had a stint where I was a part of an improv group. We were called Court. And just very quickly, the elevator pitch is there were 5 of us. We played different roles. There were 2 lawyers, the prosecutor and the defense lawyer, the judge, the bailiff, and I was the stenographer, the note taker.
Oh, cool.
And basically, we would put one couple in the audience's relationship on trial. So
one couple in the audience randomly?
Yes.
They did not know you picked?
No. So they would tell us how they met. And then through a series of improv games, we would reenact how they met, playing the different characters in their life, playing their relationship, and then we would put their relationship on trial. So it was a blast.
Like you'd have people arguing for their relationship and people arguing against their relationship?
Exactly. So 2 of the characters were the prosecuting and the defense lawyer. So the defense lawyer would basically side with them, and then just chaos ensued.
Oh, that sounds so fun.
Whose Line Is It Anyway? Where there's different improv games baked into the show.
Dude, that sounds awesome.
It was a blast. We had a lot of fun. We performed at Third Coast Comedy Club, which is a great local comedy
here in
club.
Nashville?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
You're using a lot of past tense words. Are you still doing it?
So the improv group itself phased out. Now I've moved away from improv into more traditional acting. So I've done a handful of local commercials for Farm Bureau Insurance was a big spot that I landed last year. I just booked a recurring role for Lifeway. It's the Gospel Project for Kids.
Oh, cool.
It's a 2-year commitment. I'm really excited about.
You're going to be acting?
I'm going to be playing the host of that show.
Oh, wow.
So that starts filming, I think, in November of 2020. So
now,
next
when you
month.
say show, what is it? What is this, like a TV show? Or
So basically,
DVD?
it's a curriculum.
Okay.
So yeah, it'll be online and on for purchase. And basically, it's the name is pretty self-descriptive. Gospel Project for Kids. So that's going to be a blast. I'm really excited because that intersects my faith and my passion.
Absolutely. Are you doing all this on the side? Like you have a full-time job?
Yeah, that's where the acting kind of has been a lot of fun because I get to be selective and intentional about which projects I go after, which projects I throw my name in the hat for. Because I'm not relying on it for our sole income. I can be selective and intentional about, that looks fun. I think I'll audition for that. Obviously, there's no guarantee that I'm going to get everything that I audition for.
Yep.
But it takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
I can lean into the fun aspect of it.
Yeah. And so, like for the Gospel Project, for example, are you going to use vacation days for this or record in the evening or Saturdays or weekends or like when do you fit this
Basically, because my job is full-time remote, there's no office.
Oh, I see.
I can work it out with my team members and my creative director and say, hey, on this day and on this day, I'm going to flex my hours so I can go film for a couple of days. And
I see.
As long as my deliverables are, hit and sent, I'm basically empowered to kind of do the things that I want to do on the side.
Yeah, very cool. So I'm going to Phoenix. Marianne and I are going to Phoenix with 2 couples this weekend, and one has been a stenographer forever.
That's amazing.
It's the guy who takes notes in courts, right?
With those little typewriter things.
They have specific typewriters, right, with less keys or something.
Yeah,
it's somehow you write in shorthand.
Really fascinating. I'll be honest, I didn't do a ton of research on that particular character because we couldn't get our hands on the device.
Okay.
for the show. So what I ended up doing was just taking notes via a notepad and a pencil.
Okay, sure.
And just, long form, shorthand kind of.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really interesting profession.
It is an interesting profession. And yes, the courtroom is one use, but then apparently another use, which is even maybe a little bit more lucrative a lot of times, is to be hired for depositions and so forth.
Yes.
And so the same person usually can be contracted for that as well. And I think there's a little bit more money when you get into the depositions and so forth. So yeah, it's a fascinating thing. When you are, how does the stenographer chime in? Like, I'm having a hard time because usually they're just sitting there typing. You know what I mean? So like, how are you chiming in? How are you part of that improv?
Yeah. So in a lot of different ways. One of the fun ways that we did it was they would always, so with this improv group, we were always trying to catch the other one off guard, so that hilarity could ensue.
Okay.
So they would always try to, they would act out a scene and they say, Julian, could you repeat that back to us for the courtroom? And so then in a funny, weird, awkward way, I would have to reenact a certain piece.
Okay.
So I would kind of lean into it in that way.
Yep.
But honestly, once the games started within the show structure, we would take the bailiff hat off, the judge hat, and we would just start playing the people in their lives, the couple. Does that make sense?
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah.
So basically,
Okay.
one person throughout the entire show would assume the role of the girl,
I see.
and then the other would assume or the girlfriend, and then the other person would assume the role of the boyfriend.
Wow.
Then I would maybe come in and be the father,
I see.
and who the disapproving father who didn't like him, and
Yep.
so we would have to remember who we were playing.
Yes.
And as the different games would start to take shape, like there was a prop game where we would go around collecting different items from people in the audience, and that became a crime scene.
Oh, okay.
So you would pull out like a thing of Tic Tacs from a gal's purse in the audience and somehow have to tie that into why they were in love.
Yes, I see.
So we would take on different roles.
Man, that's, you got to think quick.
It's a lot of mental gymnastics, and
Yes.
it is a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure. Andrew, it was someone wasn't it just yesterday that was saying in improv, the one thing you never do is say no. You always like throw it back.
Yes.
You never deny the what's given to you outright.
Yeah. Who
You
was
always
that?
have
Who said that?
That was Jamie George.
Jamie George, just yesterday. Yeah. Yeah. We in improv, and he was actually talking about improv, wasn't he?
He was.
Like if I say that's a purple couch, this was his example. You don't say no, it's not. Well, that just died.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You got to throw
Yes.
it back somehow. You got to keep it going.
100%.
You always have to keep it moving.
100%,
Yeah.
110%. You're especially in a troupe like that where there was 5 of us total. The last thing that you want to do is create an empty void where
Right.
you can't have any comedy. Like
A dead end road.
exactly.
Now what do you do?
You're always creatively, hopefully comically piggybacking off of what your partner's throwing at you.
Yeah. Okay. So what makes people laugh? The one thing that I heard, I think this was on a Joe Rogan podcast this summer with someone who's kind of into the science of humor, or maybe it's just another comedian.
I'm gonna have to
forget.
watch that because I'm fascinated by that as well. Just
Yeah.
what makes good comedy.
Exactly. What makes good comedy and what makes people laugh? And the one thing that they
Gosh.
talked about that I do remember is if there is a surprise.
Yes.
So if you have people's mind heading down this trail,
Yes.
and bloop, all of a sudden you bring it left or right very quickly, that can trigger a laugh. So there's that. I think then there's the outrageous, the exorbitant,
Yes.
I think of kind of like the jesters back in the day, that was kind of their thing. Like everything was so outrageous. But what
Yeah.
do you kind of play on to make people laugh?
First and foremost, it all depends. Man, comedy can be subjective. Like I could think Jim Gaffigan's stand-up is absolutely gut-bustingly hilarious. He has that bit where he's self-deferential, where he's self-reflective and self-deprecating, where he'll just like go into this character where he's making fun of his own joke. Some people that might go right over their head and they don't think that's funny at all.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of comedy is subjective.
Yep.
However, there are universal rules and principles that you can try to, kind of lean into. I think one of the things that we tried to capture with our improv show was the physical humor, the physicality of, getting into awkward positions and contorting our body in certain ways. Like, for example, we had one game where one character was showing a slideshow to the courtroom of different pictures of their first dates. And the other guys were having, I would say, like, and look at this picture where they were writing a a tandem bike together in Central Park. And then quickly the guys would have to figure out how to use their body to make a couple riding a tandem bike in Central Park.
Yes.
That's all physical.
Yes.
And it's a surprise because I'm not only surprising the audience, but I'm surprising my comedy partners and forcing them to react.
Yep.
So physical humor is a huge thing for sure. And then also, I would say find what your niche is as a comedian and lean into that niche, that voice. Some people, it may not be the dry Nate Bargatze, who's a hilarious local comedian.
Oh, he's so funny. He's very good.
I love his stuff.
Yeah.
I adore his comedy style. It's dry, it's clean, it's storytelling. A lot of his stuff is long-winded. He'll say a story, and he'll plant one joke at the beginning, and you almost forget about it.
His bit on the horse, the dead horse.
That's the one I was thinking of.
That is second to none.
Yeah.
That is so good. And you think you're past the dead horse and you come back to it, and that's the clincher.
Yes.
That's the hook is so set at that point.
I could not agree more. I'm glad you've seen that particular stand-up because that was actually what I was referencing. And I think it depends on what your brand of humor is. And I think just leaning into it is being true to yourself. It sounds like a cop-out, I know, but I promise you that is the best thing that you can do for yourself as a comedic actor, stand-up, improv team member, whatever the case may be. Lean into whatever it is your brand of humor is. Don't try to do too much.
Yes, exactly. I saw John Christ at Edley's last night in 12 South. So apparently he lives here in Nashville.
Yeah, he relocated, I think, last year or the year before. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't talk to him, but someone was saying recently that he and Nate Bargatze have traveled together before, have done some amount of shows together.
Did he have an entourage with him? I'm just curious.
No.
Wow.
No. Why would he have an entourage?
Well, the reason I asked that is because, excuse me, so I've seen him around Nashville a couple of times as well. Randomly at B&A at the airport.
Okay.
And then randomly he was doing one of his, I think it was his bits on Nashville murals. And we have a mural outside of our office.
Okay.
And it seems like that's kind of how he rides. He kind of just does his own thing.
Okay.
And this was like a year ago. So I didn't know if between then and now, as he continues to get more popular, if maybe he had like a click with him. But it sounds like he's still true to himself.
There was a guy eating with him, but that was it. But you don't, he's not famous enough to have an entourage.
Well, that's fair. I don't know. Well, that's the thing. He's a social media celebrity. So I think you could, he's an influencer. I think it's safe to peg him as an influencer now.
Oh, maybe I should follow him on Instagram or something. How many followers does he have?
I want to say it's in the hundreds of thousands.
Is it really?
Yeah. But I didn't know if maybe he had like
check mark.
A little
1.1 million.
Okay. See, even more than I thought. Yeah.
Excuse me. 1.1 million followers.
He's got a following in his own right.
No way.
Yeah.
I had no idea he was that famous. I just followed him.
Yeah.
Very cool. Good for him. Well, Theo Von's in town now. Are you familiar with Theo Von?
Mm-mm.
Another stand-up comic. I think he was from L.A. He has some really, really funny stuff. He's kind of the trailer park, poor white boy wearing the mulligan that's his shtick.
Yes.
And it really works for him. Andrew Schultz. Are you familiar with Andrew Schultz?
No.
Okay. He is, I don't know where he's from, but he does a lot of like improv. I haven't seen any of his specials. I haven't seen any of his specials. I'm not sure if he has any on Netflix. I don't think he does, but a lot of his comedy, at least what, you find on YouTube and Instagram and so forth, is just sitting at, in the comedy club, just like making jokes about whoever's sitting there, like in the moment. Like it's kind of a mix between improv and stand-up. It's pretty impressive.
I'll
it seems
have to check
very
that
difficult to get to that level. Is there any, you mentioned Jim Gaffigan, who I think is very funny, and he is clean, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
He has like 3 or 4 or 5 Netflix specials.
Oh, so many. He's even got an Amazon Prime special that's out right now where he's going to different countries and performing in front of different audiences and playing off of the context of where he's at. I think there's 2 or 3 episodes up right now.
It's up right now?
Yes, it's hilarious.
I like him.
The first episode, he's in, I think, Toronto, and he has so much fun with the Canadians. Oh, my gosh. The humor is hysterical, and he's such a brilliant situational comedian.
Yeah.
Like, he can really thrive on the context, and he's self-aware. I would say you guys should, if you haven't already, one of the greatest pieces of improv comedy that I've ever seen in my life. It's a 3-part series on Netflix. I'm going to butcher their name, but it's like Middleditch and Schwartz, maybe? Middleditch. Just type in Middleditch. Yeah, it is. Middleditch and Schwartz. It's
Middleditch and Schwartz.
You've seen these actors in everything. It's one of those things where you're like, oh, it's that guy.
Okay.
You know, you've seen those actors where they're in a bunch of stuff.
Oh, dude, this is the guy from... This is the guy from...
Parks and Rec. He's in Parks and Rec.
Wait, the guy on the right?
Oh, no.
The guy on the left is the crazy son in Parks and Rec.
Yes.
The guy with the lawyer dad with the crazy sister.
Yes.
Okay, but the guy on the right is the guy who plays...
Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley.
Yeah, he's in Silicon Valley.
Oh, wow.
He was also the Verizon spokesperson for a stint.
Yes.
I cannot recommend this Netflix special enough. Like,
oh, wow.
I would even say when I leave, put off working and watch it. It is gut bustingly hilarious. It's because it's just 2 guys playing a dozen characters, and they'll I don't want to give too much away, but they have so much fun with forgetting who's who. Like they'll break character and be like, "What are you doing? You're the wife," and the audience loses it.
So it's live.
It's
cool.
in front of a live
I'll
audience.
definitely be checking that out.
So good.
Yeah, that looks fantastic.
It's one of those shows that I will rewatch.
Okay.
And find something new every time.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. How? What do you just were? Was it the director on a documentary?
Yes. So that's been interesting too. Is randomly my love for directing has started to come full circle. Just out of the blue, out of the absolute blue, of no effort on my own part. Randomly, I'll just quickly give you guys the elevator pitch for this documentary. In Oak Ridge, Tennessee, outside of Knoxville, it was the birthplace and the origin of the nuclear era. In the 40s, during World War II, America needed a plot of land that was off the beaten path where they could enrich uranium and build the atomic bomb. So overnight, they erected a nuclear facility to essentially build the atomic bomb. But they needed a town to support the employees that worked there. So overnight, a school popped up, a grocery store, a post office, and they called it the Secret City. They called it the town no one's from because it was a response to World War II. Then, of course, World War II ended, the Cold War happened, and they continued to operate the facility at Oak Ridge well into, the 70s. But then in the 80s, the site was put on standstill, and then in 87, it was shut down. So everybody was faced with a critical decision. Do we fence up this facility and do we just kind of let it become a Chernobyl situation, where it damages the environment? And at one point, somebody in the documentary says, listen, in the 80s, it was one tornado away from being a massive environmental liability.
Golly.
And it was costing taxpayers tens of millions of dollars simply to maintain, just to keep it there. And it wasn't even doing anything. Or the other, possibility was, do we properly decommission it and give it back to the community? They ultimately decided on the latter. And so what then began was a decades-long cleanup project, the first of its kind in the world, where they took a sprawling gaseous diffusion power plant, properly tore it down, and reindustrialized it for future generations. And in 2020, they crossed the finish line.
Really?
So the documentary was focusing on the cleanup project, a brief history, and basically celebrating the men and women who, over the span of decades, properly decommissioned this site and gave it back to the community.
Well, so was Oak Ridge the new name of that town?
No, it became.
Or was there an Oak Ridge? Because there's the Oak Ridge Boys, right? That's a country band of some kind.
So Oak Ridge, it was just a plot of land essentially, and that's a really, really great history detail that we didn't touch on in the documentary. How Oak Ridge came to be the name itself, but it was just always referred to as Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And so it's really, really, really fascinating. And they also talk about how, this particular plot of land was unique because there's tons and tons of fog because it sits in a valley. So they thought that they would protect them from enemy flyovers who were trying to take pictures and spy on the enemy, on American efforts, enemies.
The valley and the fog was part of the strategy behind that particular location?
Yes. They say that was intentional in erecting the facility there. It's a super
I didn't
fascinating.
know there was any nuclear facilities like that in Tennessee.
It's crazy.
I never heard of it.
It's one of those stories where you're like, how do more people not know about this? This should be a feature film.
Yeah.
This should be a Netflix series. Like, this is a crazy story. One of the central figures in the documentary, one of the guys that we interviewed, his name's Dr. Harold Connor. He was the first African-American chemical engineer, and he was there in the 50s when in its heyday, and he saw all the way, years and years, decades later, the cleanup project to completion. He's a fascinating character.
I think I saw a picture of him on your Instagram.
On my social media post.
Was that him, or his character?
That was him.
Okay.
That was Dr. Harold Connor. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't, we didn't do any reenactments, by the way.
Oh, okay. Got it.
There was no reenactments.
But you would interview him
We interviewed him. We interviewed all kinds of engineers and, DOE representatives, basically the men and women who made the cleanup possible.
Oh,
very cool. It was super, super, super fascinating and a real joy to direct because they were telling the story. I was just sitting back with my notes, making sure that the overall theme was being shepherded in the right direction.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of pressure off as a director.
Sure. What was the overall theme? Kind of an American kind of victory where we cleaned it up and it's good, or like what was the kind of the point of the documentary?
Great question. So when the client, who was the Department of Energy, came to us with the project, it started out as, we just want something that celebrates the men and women. We want to be able to show this at an event in October that showcases all of the hard work that went into this cleanup project, that celebrates the men and women, and it's basically a pat on the back.
Oh, and the Department of Energy wanted it done, I see. Okay.
But it evolved. It became a story of firsts. This was the first, nuclear power plant where they enriched uranium in America. This was, Harold Connor, the main character, was the first African-American to get his master's degree.
Deal. And you said in the 50s they had a black engineer? That's amazing.
It's super, super fascinating. And then fast forward all these years later, it's now the first successful decommissioning of a gaseous diffusion plant in the world.
Wow.
It's the first, and so it became the story of firsts, another first.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So they're trying to appeal to prospective business owners and CEOs to come and put their businesses here. They want to reindustrialize the land, and one person put it like, we want to be the Silicon Valley of the South. We want businesses, tech companies to come here because we have all the infrastructure.
Okay,
just because we have demoed the buildings and restored the land, to its original use doesn't mean that we can't reindustrialize it now.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a Puerto Rican woman in it who she started a pharmaceutical business, and she's one of the first to bring her business from Puerto Rico to Oak Ridge.
Oh, wow.
So she's a first as well. So it became the story of firsts.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And it's not anything that we could have ever sought out to tell.
Yeah.
It just kind of organically happened.
Like, how big is this area? Is it like the size of a county, or the size of like a couple hundred acres or a couple thousand acres?
So the neighboring town of Oak Ridge has evolved into just your everyday run-of-the-mill town with car dealerships, grocery stores, schools, etc. But the Oak Ridge facility, the footprint is acres and acres and acres.
Okay.
Acres and acres. I mean, dozens of acres.
But not not thousands of acres.
No. But huge, huge. I mean, when the buildings were standing, you could put multiple football fields.
I see.
In the buildings themselves.
Do you know what it is about nuclear reactors or whatever, nuclear energy, that's so hard to get rid of?
Oh, gosh. So I think it's a lot of things. I think, for starters, when it was in its heyday in the 50s and 60s, they didn't know a lot about what they were handling. So I think that from the outset, it was improperly kind of handled and managed. Mm-hmm. And so over time, as we learn more and more, about nuclear power and uranium and all those things, as we become more informed about all of that, we can look back retroactively and say, oh, we should have done this differently. We could have done this better. So I think it's a product of not being completely foolproof and handled properly as it should have been from the outset.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my suspicion.
Sure.
That would be my, response to that.
Now, when they're cleaning it up, are you talking about like they're digging up dirt and hauling the dirt away, or they're just like pumping out things out of tanks and somehow hauling that away in tanker trucks? Like, what are they?
All of that. Guys and gals in hazmat suits walking around with meters and, these huge, 18-wheelers with like these. It's so interesting. They had hollowed out beds with liners in it. And they would basically, with, these earth movers and these diggers and these claws, they would take all of the waste, drop it in there, seal it. It was a whole process that required countless engineers, countless scientists. It's almost as if it took just as much, forward thinking to tear it down as it did to erect it, as it did to build all of the science.
I believe that. Is that the facility there?
That's it right there. That's K25, the K25 site in its heyday.
K25 site in its heyday. That's a nuclear site in Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Yep.
It is in the valley. You can see that. The listeners can't see our TV right now. We're going to work on that, right, Andrew? So eventually this can be in picture awesome. on YouTube.
Yeah.
But for the listeners, they can't see it. But that is a big facility. But is that building blown up and gone, or is it? That building's gone.
In the documentary, you can see the footprint now where it was just completely demolished.
Did they do that because the building was falling down or because they had to, because it had nuclear
all of that
stuff
because of all of that? It was because it was constructed in haste. There was the structure and the foundation in certain parts weren't completely sound. I mean, it was an arms race when they were trying. Trying to get us to the moon. Mm-hmm. There was a ticking clock.
Yeah.
And so in their haste, there were just certain things that weren't done properly. And you could see that as years later, as it was starting to deteriorate, all of the areas in which it was becoming a liability.
Yeah. Where do they take this stuff?
That's a great question. I don't know, and no one ever outright said that.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So that's
interesting.
That's a really interesting piece because after they demolish certain aspects of it, they'll run countless tests. There's one, this is crazy. There's one shot where they demoed a huge building, and they were just spraying water at it to combat the asbestos
from like filtering up into the air.
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah.
But as far as like where it's now, I don't know, space? No, not space. Not space.
The stuff floating around in space. I mean, is there any way to bury stuff under the ocean, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, that's
I wonder if there's a way to do that.
That's super fascinating. And, this was the first documentary. This was my first foray into documentary filmmaking. And I learned a lot of lessons along the way. And that's definitely an interesting thing that should have been asked outright. Hey,
Google that, Andrew, and see what you find there.
Where did it go?
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't know much about nuclear waste.
Yeah.
I just know it's very, very toxic.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't move there. I'm sure they've got it cleaned up. I have some level of belief there. And then,
but there's also a healthy amount of skepticism, probably.
Yeah.
Even as we were walking around with our camera and our crew, it's like, man, this is nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Like,
How long were you on site?
It ended up being 2 weekends worth of filming.
Okay.
We ended up shooting around 11 hours of footage. And the documentary, it's a micro doc. It's a short doc. It ended up being 13 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So
where can people watch this?
So that's what's interesting about this. We delivered me and my fellow collaborator filmmaker, we delivered what we have called the client cut or the client version. That is very heavy-handed with the look at what the men and women were able to do. Isn't this great? It's basically geared for the celebration event.
Yeah,
that
it's
happened.
really for DOE.
Exactly.
Who was paying the bills.
Which it doesn't feel, I will say I'm very pleased that it doesn't feel too corporate. It feels very cinematic in nature. However, in about a month, my buddy Chris and I are going to revisit the edit and tell the story that we want to tell with it, that we will then submit to Sundance Film Festival, South by Southwest.
You have those rights?
We actually we're going to get written approval. I already asked our DOE representative, hey, if we rework this and get your green light, can we submit this to festivals? And he was like, his name's Ben. He works in public relations. He was a huge champion for this project. He was like, dude, that's yes.
Oh, wow.
We just need to have final say on the cut and make sure it doesn't make us look bad or anything. But otherwise, submit away.
You might get a film in Sundance.
That would be incredible.
That would be incredible.
That's the dream. I feel like it's the kind of story that people just have to hear,
Yeah.
have to see. Like,
Well, exactly.
I feel like
it's
I feel like it's lightning in a bottle. I really do. I really do.
Did you find where they took it, Andrew, or no?
The best I could find was, I hope Wikipedia is not lying to me, on the Wikipedia article for Oak Ridge, Tennessee, under the since World War II section of the bigger Manhattan Project section, it says, in 1983, the DOE declassified a report showing that significant amounts of mercury had been released from the Oak Ridge Reservation into the East Fork Poplar Creek between 1950 and 1977. A federal court ordered the DOE to bring the Oak Ridge Reservation into compliance with federal and state environmental regulations. So as in regards to where the stuff went, you don't really know. Could be in space, as he said, or it's in the creek and we've got fish with 3 heads in there.
Yeah, that is an interesting question about where that stuff went, because waste cleanup is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a house one time that had a little bit of what was it, like burning? What do you call it? Oil? It's like heating oil. Basically, I don't think it's as popular down here, but it was a bigger thing in the Northeast. The tanker, like a little mini truck, would come out and put some heating oil in a tank in your basement, and then you'd burn that oil for your furnace. One of the houses had a very small leak into the basement of the house, and the Department of Environmental Conservation got a hold of it, and it cost $30,000 to clean up.
Insanity.
Insane. It was just a little bit of oil. So now that's a nuclear facility, which is going to be way. That's a different deal.
One of the things that they highlight in the documentary is that they actually finished ahead of schedule and under budget, saving millions and millions and millions of taxpayer dollars. So they were actually able to. That is a huge success in of itself.
Yeah, it's great. How'd you get this gig as director?
Actually, can we have a clean break right here?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to ask this.
Yep.
I
get
just
you
got
out of here.
I just got a message about a 10 o'clock meeting that I have to hop on.
Yeah, let's go.
That? Can I do that and then come back, or would it be best to
Let's just finish.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just get you out of here.
Okay.
We don't even need to do a clean break here. Julian, you got to go.
There you go.
Thank you for being on the podcast.
This has been an absolute blast, and I'm super humbled and honored that you invited me on here. And anytime I can have the chance to talk about creativity, whether that's in writing, acting, directing, I'm totally up for it.
Yeah.
This has been so much fun. I love what you're doing with the podcast. I think having the variety of guests that you're having makes it so appealing and so interesting.
Hopefully.
Because you're not,
I'm glad you think that.
It's not super niche or specific, like you're only talking to business owners or you're only talking to entrepreneurs. It's going to run the gamut of all kinds of different personalities.
Yeah, that's what we're after. So we'll see if it works.
Yeah.
On that note, send us any links that you'd like us to share.
That'd be amazing.
When we put the episode out.
I'd love to do that. I'd be honored.
Julian Vaca, everybody. Thank you for coming by.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks,
Have a
guys.
good day.
Appreciate it. I'm going to jump on this,
fun.
and then I'm going to come and give a proper goodbye.